Hey, you beautiful beings. Welcome to Empowered Human with Nina Garcia. I am your host, and you are listening to the Throwback episodes. Yeah, I have officially taken a pause on creating new episodes for the podcast so that I can focus on writing the book. It became very clear that while I have loved doing the podcast, I'm getting these episodes out every week to you all piecemeal. I was like, no more, no more. You all were like, please, can you get us all those skills and tools, Nina, in one area so that we can do the empowered human journey, so that we can really see what it's like from start to finish, to which I say, yes, absolutely. Let me get this to you. Yes. So what you're going to be hearing is this. You're going to be hearing throwback episodes from all 6 seasons, okay? It's not going to be every episode, so don't freak out on me yet. But it is going to be some of the episodes that were highlighted, that were popular, that we think, maybe you all missed and we want to bring it back. You're going to be hearing throwback episodes, and I am going to be listening along with you. I too want to hear about the journey and experience the journey that I had as we moved from Triggered, Can We Play With That, the original podcast, all the way to Empowered Human with Nina Garcia. So you're going to hear personal stories. You're going to hear interviews. You're going to be given skills in every episode. Yes, you're going to be given tools in every episode for you to become skilled in. It is totally up to you whether you want to listen. If it's not the episode for you, skip to the next week, right? You just take what works for you, leave what doesn't. And if there's some stuff you're curious about, why don't you just go ahead and put that on the shelf? The podcast has always been about putting resources in the hands of people without needing to pay for it, right? And so this is no different. Even with these throwback episodes, what you're going to hear is this. We're going through, just as I said, you're going to still hear me talk at the beginning of each episode, letting you know, hey, we've had a transition. You're going to hear the original intro to the episode. You're going to hear the show music, and then you're going to hear the full original episode. This could mean that dates are off, that times are off, that people are talked about, that may no longer be in our lives, right? Just be aware of that. At the very end of the episode, you're going to see this face again come back to remind you that it was a throwback episode and to maybe offer you some adventure challenges as you move from week to week, right? Though the format of the episode did change over the years that we've done this podcast, the value is still there. So if you like something, definitely hit me up on Instagram at DramaTherapist Nina and be like, Nina, I love that throwback episode about XYZ thing. Yes, fill in the blank with that. Let me know. And if there's something that you're looking for in the meantime, also hit me up on Instagram at DramaTherapist Nina and let me know. Otherwise, stay curious and enjoy the ride, folks. I'll be right along there with you. Welcome to Empowered Human, the dramatically playful podcast that invites you to heal humanity, the one within you, me, and the world at large. I'm your host, drama therapist, empowerment specialist, and not to mention empowered human, Nina Garcia, and I'm so stoked you're joining me on the journey. Every Wednesday, you are invited to explore transforming from powered to empowered with genuinely human stories of courageous existence, healing from invalidation, and truly belonging to you. So wherever you are on the spectrum, from empowerment curious to empowered human ambassador, this podcast is designed to humanize. Get ready to lean into your edge, heal your worldview, and finally belong to you. This is Empowered Human. So what is this podcast? Yes, if you haven't heard before, this is the podcast that invites you to embrace all of you, to vibrantly exist as the human being that you are, not just the parts that make other people comfortable. Yes. Now, there is, of course, some work to doing this. Yes, for self-love, for self, right? Being able to work with others, and then for the world at large. But before we get into anything too big, I'm going to give you some of the rundown basics for what we're looking at in this episode. If you are moving forward, listening in, you're ready to do the work, one of the principles, one of the things, the core tools, right, that we work with here is the empowerment spectrum. If you have never heard about this, if you don't know what this is, it will be in the show notes, so you can absolutely have access to that resource at your fingertips, right? It's there. Utilize it. If you don't know where you are on the empowerment spectrum, we also have a quiz right here at your fingertips. Head to the show notes, go take the empowerment spectrum quiz, right? It will give you an idea of where you are in one of the 5 character profiles that we look at. And if you continue to lean in, you're like, oh, this sounds like it is my jam, Nina, I'm ready. Then fantastic. Grab a journal or a really good friend to dialogue with about what is going to come up for you in this episode. Because if I am doing it right, there should be things that come up for you in this episode that you say, I hadn't thought about it that way, or, oh my gosh, I completely disagree, or I could not agree more. Whatever it is, you are allowed to feel how you feel. So let me drop you one nugget of information right now. And I do want you to write this down and or click save in that beautiful being brain of yours. Obligation is not liberation. It is a core theme of how we in the empowered human lifestyle live. I do not do things out of obligation. I make a choice. That is the biggest step, or step is not even the word I want to use, so allow me to correct that. When people talk about, Nina, how do I get liberated? How do I utilize this empowered human lens? And how do I be an empowered human? It really is about self-liberation. And one of the tools that we see that people click into first is being able to recognize that obligation, when you feel obligated to do something, that's not liberation. When you feel like it is a choice to do something you value, and then you are living that through that value, that there is where we find the liberation. So when I say obligation is not liberation, you are not obligated to listen to this episode. Do practice consent moving forward. You are got to be ready to listen to this episode and listen through to the end, because we do plan it in a arc, much like a character arc. Why? Because you, my friends, are a character right now, and we about to liberate your story. Okay, so let's have some fun. Yes, we are going to, of course, play with things. So at this point, I hope you have your journal. I hope you've got some notes ready, because you know that I am so curious. Are you ready to play? Let's take a breath so we can begin. Inhale into your body, exhale out of your body, and we'll start. Today is all about the empowerment spectrum. I wanted to kick it off strong, and I wanted to really dive in depth into what the empowerment spectrum is. When we think about any kind of spectrum, first little nugget I want to drop you, I want you to think about it from 1 to 5. 1 being the least empowered you could be, so to speak, and 5 being the most empowered you could be, so to speak. Okay, so that's our spectrum. We are going to go through it from 1 through 5. So feel free to, of course, take notes as we go, and do check in with yourself. If you find yourself saying, oh my goodness, Glacius, I really identify as that one, then fantastic. Let's own it without judgment. And I'm going to say that back. Practicing being non-judgmental. If you are overcome with shame as you explore your own identity, your own narratives, and your own empowerment or lack thereof, you may not be able to do this work as easily or as effectively, because you may be working through a blanket or a weight of shame. Let's just grab that now, put it to the side or on the shelf if you feel like you gotta have it. Let's just put it over there on the shelf for now, and really say, you know what? I'm going to practice being non-judgmental. I'm going to practice being neutral as I listen to these things, and really just say, oh, that is what I noticed that's true in my life, or, oh, that is not true in my lived experience. Okay. So non-judgmental lens, that's the next nugget. Here's the one after that. You just heard me say, in your lived experience. Okay. We ain't talking about stereotypes here. I'm not talking about the stories you've been told. I'm literally asking and inviting you to say, hey, I want to think about what is my lived experience. And that is what I'm going to explore. Okay. I'm super excited. Here we go. When we think about the empowerment spectrum, we're going to start at 1 with the quote unquote least empowered you could be. Now, I don't want this to also be something that we think of as like, oh, this is worse. This is just reality. Remember that whole, we're not going to stereotype and we're just going to think about our lived experience. There is a reason why you have a habit or an experience of existing at any point on this spectrum, and it is likely for your survival. So now that you know anywhere you feel like you identify has been in your lived experience, just the reality. We don't need to be judgmental about it. We just need to ask ourselves this: am I okay with it? And if I'm not, if it's not serving me and it's not serving the people around me, and heck, it may not be serving the world at large, would I be open to changing it? Would I be open to shifting my relationship with power? The entire empowerment spectrum is about different power dynamics. So that is just a reality. And here we go with number one. Number one on the empowerment spectrum is a disempowered power dynamic. So I want you to imagine, and of course, we have a visual on this. You can pull up the little visual diagram right from the show notes, just in case. That first column, right, that first character profile, that first power dynamic that we are looking at is disempowered. I want you to imagine that there's an arrow down for the self and an arrow down for others. When we think about those two arrows going down for self and other, that is how people who exist in a disempowered dynamic have survived. They have not hoped for too much. They have not gone out for too much. They have really said, I'm not going to lean into my edge. I'm not going to challenge things. I'm not going to take any risks. I'm going to keep myself down here at the status quo or even less than, because then I won't lose anything. And you know what? I'm not going to expect anything of anyone else. In fact, I may be okay with minimizing and putting other people down, because that is the world that we live in. There isn't enough joy to go around. There isn't enough resources. There's not enough love, all of that, right? That is a disempowered dynamic. And I really want you to think about, for people who exist in that dynamic, their lived experience says that if they are going to survive, that is how they need to engage. Think about that. The places in the world where we don't have enough resources, where it is a real struggle to survive, okay? And I'm not just talking about physically, I'm talking about emotionally, I'm talking about psychologically, okay? There's all these different facets to why a disempowered dynamic exists. And hey, folks, it is to help those people survive. And again, I want us to come back to that very first question, asking yourself, if you're like, oh my goodness, Glacius, is this where I'm at? Is it where you want to be with? Are you okay with it? And if not, are you open to shifting that power dynamic? I'm going to leave that with you, and we're going to move on to number two, okay? The character profile that we have for number two, we call it a codependent power dynamic, okay? Being very specific that this is about a power dynamic. So for people who exist in a codependent power dynamic, the arrow is down for the self, but it is up for the other. In a codependent power dynamic, the self is willing to sacrifice itself, its own needs, its own wants, so that it can keep the other individual in power. That other individual in power usually expects that person to do it. But here's the thing, they don't need to demand or command or anything, because that person is willing to sacrifice themselves. This is how that power dynamic is able to stay, with the self down and the other up. Now think about how this may have helped these people to survive. If you were an individual who did not believe or know or have the intellectual, emotional, or physical capacity to help yourself survive, if you needed to depend on someone else for whatever reason, do we see how a codependent dynamic could actually help you survive that version of the world? For survival is why these power dynamics exist. But again, if you find that you are saying, oh my gosh, Nina, I'm the individual who sacrifices myself, or I'm the individual who expects people to sacrifice themselves for me, I want you to ask yourself the same question. Is that how I want to exist in the world? Am I okay with that? And if not, am I open to changing that power dynamic? Let's move on to number three. Number three character profile we call the avoidant power dynamic. If you are in an avoidant power dynamic, I want you to imagine that there is a sort of like slashes through the self and a slash through the other. It's negating a story, okay? When we are existing in an avoidant power dynamic, we are literally saying, I'm going to avoid what I've seen, in my lived experience because it's uncomfortable, because I don't understand it. I'm just going to negate it. I'm going to avoid it. I don't want to deal with that. And you know what? Even if I saw it or heard it or felt it, because I'm negating it for me, that also means that I'm able to negate it for you. So, well, you don't have to think about it or feel it or blah, blah, blah. It really doesn't work that way, right? Life doesn't actually work that way. People will still feel the things. We're still thinking the thoughts. We're still feeling the discomfort, right? You're thinking about uncomfortable things. You're feeling uncomfortable things. You may have witnessed or physically experienced uncomfortable things, maybe even dangerous things. And yet, if you are living and existing in an avoidant power dynamic, what you have been taught and conditioned to believe for your survival is that it is okay, and sometimes, in fact, necessary, for you to avoid the truth. The challenge, of course, with this power dynamic is that when we are avoiding the truth, it does not make the truth any less real. If you witness somebody be abused and you say, that's not my business, that's not what I'm supposed to be focusing on right now. So the challenge, of course, with this avoidant power dynamic is that the truth still exists. Even an uncomfortable truth still exists, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So this is how we think about, how does harm become perpetuated? This is how. It's because of an avoidant power dynamic, right? Of the many reasons why. When we don't acknowledge the truth of what is, how can we change it? Of course, as we're talking about these things, we remember this has been for someone's survival. They have been taught that if you just avoid it and don't pay attention to it, then you can survive. And the thing is, you can survive. But are you really vibrantly existing and thriving when we negate the truth of what is? So, of course, even if this is your power dynamic and you say, goodness gracious, this is where I'm at, same question, friend. Is this where I want to be? Am I okay with this? And if not, am I okay with changing my power dynamic? Let's move on to number 4. Quick break for a sec. If Empowered Human is offering you something valuable about courage, healing, belonging, or love at your core, you may want to work with me. In particular, if you know of or identify as a high-achieving man, and I say this quite seriously because if you don't, I'm going to drive you up a friggin' wall. High achiever that has leveled up in every arena except your relationship with yourself or your relationships with others. Visit empoweredhuman.love for more on how you can level up in your relationships with one of our Empowered Human intensives. Intensives understand the value of your time. Of the 3 that I offer, Walk into Courage covers a month's worth of weekly sessions in just 2 hours. Dive into Courage is a 3-day intensive that can cover up to 6 months worth of sessions. And Ascend into Courage is a year-long program to give you the skills and the network you need to level up for lifelong emotional security. When it comes to leveling up in your relationships, I got you. Head to empoweredhuman.love for more, but for now, back to the episode. Number 4 is the bread and butter for why people end up usually coming to work with me. You are stuck in a powered dynamic, capital P, powered dynamic. So in a power dynamic, we imagine that the arrow is up for the self and it is down for the other. What does that mean, folks? That you are willing to validate your own stories, your own existence, and you are willing to invalidate the existence of others. Now, why would you do that? Because in this power dynamic, you have been taught that it is okay to minimize, misrepresent, or outright reject another human being because their story is not your story. You've likely been taught that different means less than, okay? Now, here's the thing. We're practicing that non-judgmental lens. Most of us are raised in this powered dynamic, in particular, those of us who are born with a lot of privilege in the world, wherever we exist in the world. So if you come from that capital P power dynamic, and that is where you're existing, of course, my question to you is going to be the same thing. We know that this is what you were taught to survive. We were taught that, yes, you can actually survive. And in fact, you can thrive here. But I want to ask you, if you're not okay with minimizing, misrepresenting, and outright rejecting other human beings for a different experience, not less than, but different, are you okay with that? And if you're not okay with that, Are you open to shifting your power dynamic? Let's bring it on to number 5, y'all. Number 5, if you are in an empowered dynamic, an empowered dynamic says arrow up for the self, arrow up for the other. And what that means is that you are there saying, you know what? I do want to validate and lift myself up. Ring, ring. And you know what? I do want to validate and lift others up. Ring, ring. Now, here's the thing. In an empowered dynamic, you validate that the human experience is so diverse and so vast. It's just the reality of it. And in lived experience, this is true. Humans exist in so many different ways, right? So in an empowered dynamic, you understand this. You say, you know what? My existence is valid, and so are other people who are different than me. It does not mean that you agree with everything that everyone does and everything, that everyone believes. It doesn't mean that you agree just for the sake of agreeing. It means that you understand that they are valid as a human being, and that for some reason in their lived experience, that is why they believe what they believe. Again, likely because they've been taught and conditioned these things. Now, most of us do not experience an empowered dynamic. This is a capital E, empowered dynamic in our lives. Most of us have to be taught or are learning how to do this. And that is, of course, why we have really made this podcast and why I am really leaning into the empowered human world, so people can really get a grip and grasp and perspective, an invitation to explore if empowerment with that capital E can really be a part of their own life, to validate the multiple truths that are present. And when we have a challenge between you and I, because there will be a challenge between you and I at some point, that I'm willing to build a bridge, and that I'm willing to be courageous in building that bridge, and that I'm willing to move toward healing, not harming, as I build this bridge. And that I am saying, you know what? I want belonging over rejection as I build this bridge. There's some very key elements there to the empowered human experience and the journey, which I want you to go ahead and ask yourself again, same question. If I'm here, am I okay with this? And if not, am I open to shifting it, right? And if I am okay with this, and this is what I want to lean into, that empowered dynamic. And of course, I have an empowerment bias here, right? But this isn't my lived experience, how I have thrived. And I also want to question, and I want you to question me, but if this is where we're at, and you say that empowered dynamic sounds real nice, Nina, then my invitation to you is to begin to explore some of that imagery that I just offered. Are you open to building the bridge? It's a marker of an empowered human. Are you open to courageously approaching uncomfortable topics, not avoiding uncomfortable topics? Because courage is a marker of an empowered human. It doesn't mean you feel comfortable with it all the time. It just means you're approaching that discomfort, yeah? Are you willing to exist in ways that are healing over harming, healing thoughts, feelings, behaviors, right? Intentionally going toward that direction is a marker of the empowered human. You see where I'm going with this? And last, but certainly not least, the last thing that we're looking at is, are you trying to belong? Are you working on belonging as an empowered human? Belonging over rejecting. So last, certainly not least, here's what I'm leaving you with. Your adventure challenge, because y'all know I like to give you a little homework for the upcoming week, is to explore where you exist on the empowerment spectrum. If it's where you want to be, and if not, are you open to changing it? That is your question for the upcoming week. I want you to have an answer to that. And if you're like, I need a little more curious, I'm curious about explore some more, take the empowerment spectrum quiz. It'll be in the show notes for you, right? Utilize the tool, utilize it as a resource. And thank you. It's me again, reminding you that this was a throwback episode. I hope that you were able to take something from it, even one little nugget of wisdom, and use that between this week and next week, right? The purpose of these episodes is to give you tools. It is up to you to decide whether you want to become skilled in them. You picking up what I'm putting down? So take a tool, take something, a perspective, a moment, something that works for you, and use it in your life to transform hard conversations into teachable moments, to transform the way that you play with scary moments, right? To transform your life, to help make you the most courageous, most healing-oriented, most belonging person right? No matter where you go, that you belong to yourself everywhere you go, right? Courage, healing, belonging, whatever it is that you are taking from this episode, take it with you so that you can get out there and live your most vibrant life, you beautiful human being. Okay? All right, I'm signing off for now, but I'm gonna see you soon, okay? I'm gonna see you real soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for being willing to explore healing your humanity on Empowered Human. I hope you found at least one new way to transform your worldview from powered to empowered. If you took something from the show, please take a moment of your time and subscribe to Empowered Human. And if it really nourished you, leave us a review. Your feedback helps me understand what our community needs. Not to mention, it helps others discover the empowered human life. So keep this last bit in mind. All the visual goodies come with me on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina. Stay up to date there on upcoming episodes, behind the scenes goodness, and reels dropping knowledge. Thank you again for being part of the empowered human community. Until next time, stay curious.